like to take you on a journey back in time. If you would, envision yourself in a time where our early ancestors sought shelter in caves and the only television channel was fire. You find yourself restless and looking around, you see a stone lying on the ground nearby. You pick it up, examine it, and then you toss it away. It rolls across the ground and falls into a hole and disappears out of sight. Congratulations, you've just invented the first game of skill. Lucky for us, our desire to constantly seek new forms of entertainment, as well as advancements in technology, have allowed modern humans to design increasingly more sophisticated means of testing our skills. And today I would like to talk to you about a distinctly American invention. I have done a great deal of research into the history of pinball, and I hope that this presentation leaves you with an appreciation for the game and a better understanding that its origins are deeply rooted in American history. Because pinball is one of America's oldest and most innovative games of skill. And I'd like to prove this to you by first telling you about the early days of pinball, then by highlighting pinball's glory days, and lastly inform you on the current status of the game. So according to Roger Sharp's book, Pinball, the first American pinball machine was manufactured and patented in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1871 by Montague Redgrave. This early model was based on a European game called bagatelle. Now, bagatelle was basically a board with carved holes and small nails driven into it. To play, one used a cue to move the marble around the playing field. The goal was to avoid the obstacles and sink the ball into the hole. Well, Redgrave's game, Improvements on Bagatelles, was essentially the same concept, yet he was clever enough to introduce a spring-loaded plunger to the device as a means of launching the ball into the playing field and making the cue obsolete. Over the next 50 years, this and other early pin games would come and go in fashion. And in the early 1930s, pinball begins to take root. With the onset of the Great Depression, people began to seek inexpensive forms of entertainment, and there's a surge in the popularity of coin-operated games. Though my research was a bit inconclusive, it's estimated that by 1932, there are more than 150 companies producing pinball machines in the US. However, by 1934, only about a dozen or so of these companies would remain in business. Over the next decade, companies like Gottlieb and Bally would continue to advance pinball technology. And it's during this time that we see the first electronic pinball machines with lights and bells designed to attract players. The first tilt machines are developed, and bumpers, legs, and back glass become standard features. And the advent of the replay allowed lucky players to stockpile free games which could be turned in for cash. As a result, pinball machines began to appear in corner stores, bars, and other public establishments with increasing frequency. And this leads to what I like to call the Great American Pinball Ban. In the 1940s, politicians began to cry foul on the playing of pinball, claiming that this game of chance, that this game of chance was an illegal form of gambling. Back one more. Which in a way was an illegal form of gambling. So nationwide, large cities, including New York, Los Angeles, and even Chicago, the pinball capital of the world, began to ban, and in some cases destroy, pinball machines. And by 1946, the ban would be nationwide and would last for the next 30 years, and effectively turned America into a no-pinball zone. So now that we've had a look at the early years of pinball, I would like to tell you about its glory days. So despite the ban on pinball, new companies such as Williams are founded, and American manufacturers would continue to produce pinball machines, though the majority of these were shipped overseas to meet Europe's soaring demand. During the ban, some of the most innovative advancements in pinball technology are brought to life. In 1947, Gottlieb introduced the first machine with flippers. These flippers were used to propel the balls around the board and allowed players more control over the game. Well, this proved to be a revolutionary advancement in the industry, which was able to rebrand the games as games of skill and for amusement only. Many other innovations followed, including the multi-ball and match features, the extra ball, and digital scoring, all of which are still present today. In the 1960s, pinball begins to reappear in America as places begin to lift the bans. But it's not until the 70s that pinball truly explodes. The Who's rock opera Tommy, featuring the song Pinball Wizard, brought the game into the current of popular culture. This is evident in the artwork of pinball machines, which begin to reflect more popular mainstream pop culture themes such as bands and television shows. And in 1976, the aforementioned Roger Sharp in a New York City courtroom would demonstrate in front of a panel of city council members why pinball was no longer a game of chance, but a game of skill. He was able to accomplish this Babe Ruth style by calling his shot and subsequently knocking it out of the park. and the Great American Pinball Ban immediately came to an end. The next year, Sharp would write this book, titled Pinball, which is considered by many and cited by New York Times journalist Monica Davey as the definitive history of the sport. As a result of Sharp's lucky shot, pinball shows up everywhere. Grocery stores, laundromats, bowling alleys, you name it, if there was room, there was pinball. Arcades appeared overnight, and America's young people spent hours trying to master the game. For nearly a decade, the ringing of bells, binging of bumpers, and thumping of free games filled the air in the ears of America's adolescents and young people who freely pumped quarters into the machines. And pinball was king, that is, until this guy showed up. So now that we've covered pinball's heyday, let's check out the status of pinball today. So now to clarify, Pac-Man was not the first of the arcade-style video games to appear, but his debut in 1980 instantly made these games a social phenomenon. In fact, the popularity of video games was so high that arcades began to replace the once popular pinball machines with stand-up arcade games. And despite this shift in pinball's popularity, manufacturers would continue to improve the game, and it's in the 80s that we see the first ramps and multi-level machines. Then at the end of the decade, something interesting happened. We got bored. Video games no longer held our attention like they once had, and game players once again turned back to pinball. And in the early 90s, we see the last of the modern pinball revivals. In 1992 and 93, the remaining pinball producers, which still included Gottlieb, Bally, and Williams, began cranking out a record number of new pinball machines. Included among these is the Adams family, which according to Popular Mechanics is the all-time best-selling machine ever made. But the final blow to the industry came in 1994 with the rise of the home gaming consoles. People no longer left the house seeking gaming entertainment, and over the next few years, all of the major pinball manufacturers would close their doors, except one. In 1999, a Chicago-based electronics company would buy a struggling pinball manufacturer, and Stern Pinball was founded. Now, according to the New York Times, Stern currently manufactures about 10,000 machines a year and is the only producer of pinball games remaining in the world. And on that sad fact, I need to bring this speech to an end. So today I've informed you about how in the early years, American pinball manufacturers brought about many of the innovations that we still see present in games today. Also how pinball rose to its height in popular culture during the glory days, and how new forms of gaming technology have turned pinball into America's vanishing game of skill. And to this, I would like to add that it's been my personal experience that the current decline in pinball is not due to a lack of interest in the game, but rather due to the fact that machines are becoming harder and harder to find. But that aside, I hope you now have a new appreciation for the game of pinball, its history, and what it meant to America during the 20th century.